Have you ever noticed something strange about the people around you? The ones who seem to carry the heaviest burdens often walk with the most grace. The individuals who have endured the deepest pain frequently possess the most profound wisdom. There's a woman in your neighborhood who lost her husband 5 years ago, yet she's the first to bring meals to others in crisis. There's a colleague who battles chronic illness daily, but somehow he radiates a peace that others desperately seek. What is it about suffering that seems to forge something unbreakable in the human spirit? Adabo, TOZER, that great spiritual guide who spent his life pursuing the deeper things of God, understood something that modern culture desperately tries to avoid. He recognized that there exists a mysterious relationship between pain and strength, between brokenness and beauty, between suffering and spiritual depth. While our world runs frantically from discomfort, medicating every ache and avoiding every inconvenience, TOZER saw that those who learn to suffer well often discover treasures that the comfortable never find. This isn't about glorifying pain or seeking out suffering for its own sake. Rather, it's about understanding that when hardship inevitably comes, it can become a doorway to a kind of strength that shallow living can never produce. Today, we're going to explore this powerful secret that transforms ordinary people into spiritual giants. We'll discover why the broken often become the most beautiful, why the wounded frequently become the greatest healers, and why those who suffer in silence often develop an inner strength that amazes everyone around them. If you've been walking through a difficult season, if you've wondered why pain seems to be your constant companion, or if you've questioned whether your struggles have any meaning at all, then what we're about to uncover could change everything about how you view your journey. The truth TOZER discovered is both ancient and radical. It challenges everything our comfort-seeking culture teaches us about the good life. But for those willing to embrace it, this secret becomes the foundation for a life of extraordinary depth and unshakable peace. So let's dive into this mystery together, because understanding it might just be the key to finding strength you never knew you possessed. In TOZER's time, as in ours, there was a prevailing belief that the good life meant the easy life. People assumed that blessing equaled comfort, that God's favor meant smooth sailing, and that spiritual maturity could be achieved without ever encountering serious difficulty. But TOZER, with his characteristic clarity and unflinching honesty, saw through this illusion. He observed that the greatest saints throughout history had one thing in common. They had all been acquainted with suffering. This wasn't coincidence, TOZER realized. There was something about hardship that did work in the human soul, that prosperity simply couldn't accomplish. He watched as comfortable Christians remained spiritually shallow, while those who had walked through fire emerged with a depth of character that commanded respect. The pattern was undeniable, yet it ran completely counter to what society promised would bring fulfillment. Today, we live in an age that has elevated comfort to the level of a god. We have more conveniences, more medications, more entertainment, and more ways to avoid discomfort than any generation in human history. We can order food with a swipe, cure headaches with a pill, and distract ourselves from any unpleasant thought with an endless stream of videos and social media. Yet for all our advances in making life easier, we seem to be producing a generation that crumbles at the first sign of real difficulty. Mental health struggles are at unprecedented levels. Anxiety disorders plague millions. Depression rates continue to climb. Young people, despite having access to more opportunities and resources than any previous generation, report feeling more hopeless and directionless than ever before. Could it be that in our desperate attempts to eliminate all discomfort, we've also eliminated the very experiences that build genuine strength and resilience? The problem isn't that suffering is inherently good. Pain, loss, and hardship are real, and they hurt. They disrupt our plans, challenge our faith, and force us to confront our own limitations. But TOZER understood that suffering, when approached with the right perspective, becomes a crucible that burns away everything superficial and leaves behind what is truly valuable. It strips away our pretenses, exposes our dependencies, and forces us to discover resources we never knew we possessed. This is why those who suffer in silence often develop such remarkable strength. Not because they enjoy pain, but because they've learned to extract purpose from it. They've discovered that hardship can be a teacher, that loss can deepen appreciation for what remains, and that facing our own frailty can connect us to a source of strength beyond ourselves. They understand something that the comfortable masses are missing, that the deepest treasures of life are often found not in what we gain, but in how we respond to what we lose. The first secret that transforms suffering into strength lies in understanding the difference between enduring pain and embracing its lessons. Most people, when difficulty comes, adopt a strategy of simply getting through it. They grit their teeth, count down the days, and wait for life to return to normal. This approach treats suffering as purely negative, something to be endured with as little impact as possible. But those who discover strength in their struggles take a different approach entirely. They don't just endure their hardships, they interrogate them. They ask questions like, what is this experience trying to teach me? How is this challenge revealing my character? What strengths am I developing that I wouldn't have gained any other way? This isn't about finding superficial silver linings or pretending that pain isn't real. It's about recognizing that every difficult experience carries within it the seeds of growth, if we're willing to plant them. Consider the story of a woman who lost her job unexpectedly after 15 years with the same company. The initial shock was devastating. She felt betrayed, uncertain, and afraid. For weeks, she simply tried to get through each day, applying for similar positions and hoping to return to familiar territory as quickly as possible. But as the weeks turned into months without success, something shifted in her perspective. Instead of just seeking to replace what she had lost, she began to examine what the experience was revealing about her dreams, her values, and her untapped potential. The forced pause in her career became an opportunity to rediscover passions she had set aside. The uncertainty became a teacher of trust. The rejection letters became lessons in resilience. By the time she finally found new employment, it was in a field she had always dreamed of entering, but never had the courage to pursue. The suffering hadn't just been endured, it had been transformed into a bridge to a better life. This transformation doesn't happen automatically. It requires a deliberate choice to see suffering as more than just something to survive. Tozer understood that this perspective itself was a spiritual discipline, a way of aligning ourselves with how God often works in human lives. He saw that those who learned to cooperate with their difficulties rather than just resist them often found that their pain became productive rather than merely punitive. The second secret involves the development of what we might call spiritual resilience. This isn't the same as emotional toughness or psychological endurance, though those qualities often develop alongside it. Spiritual resilience is the capacity to find meaning and purpose even in experiences that seem meaningless and destructive. It's the ability to maintain hope when circumstances offer no logical reason for optimism. Those who suffer in silence often develop this resilience not through some special spiritual gift, but through the daily practice of choosing faith over fear, purpose over despair, and connection over isolation. They learn that strength isn't the absence of feeling overwhelmed. It's the decision to keep moving forward even when you feel like you can't take another step. A man dealing with chronic illness provides a perfect example of this principle in action. Each morning, he wakes up knowing that pain will be his companion throughout the day. Some mornings, the temptation to retreat from life, to withdraw from relationships, and to surrender to bitterness is almost overwhelming. But he has learned that these moments of choice are where real strength is forged. He chooses to show up for his family, to contribute what he can at work, and to maintain connections with friends, even when it would be easier to isolate himself. Over time, this daily practice of choosing engagement over withdrawal has developed in him a kind of strength that impresses everyone who knows him. It's not that he doesn't feel pain or frustration. It's that he has learned to act with purpose despite those feelings. His colleagues turn to him for wisdom during their own difficulties. His family draws strength from his example. His friends seek his counsel because they trust his perspective. The very suffering that could have diminished him has instead become the source of his greatest contribution to others. This kind of resilience doesn't develop overnight, and it doesn't come without cost. But those who invest in building it discover that they possess resources they never knew existed. They find that they can handle situations that would have overwhelmed them in the past. They develop a confidence that isn't based on circumstances, but on their proven ability to navigate whatever life brings their way. The third secret that Tozer recognized in those who suffer well is their discovery of authentic community. Paradoxically, it's often in our most isolated moments that we learn the true value of connection. Those who try to maintain perfect facades and present only their best selves to the world often find themselves surrounded by shallow relationships. But those who have been broken by life and learned to be honest about their struggles often attract the deepest and most meaningful friendships. There's something powerful about being around someone who has walked through fire and emerged with their integrity intact. These individuals don't offer easy answers or quick fixes, but they provide something far more valuable, the assurance that it's possible to endure what seems unendurable. They become safe places for others to be honest about their own struggles, creating spaces where authentic healing can begin. A woman who battled addiction and found recovery illustrates this beautifully. During her years of struggle, she felt completely alone, convinced that no one could understand her battle or accept her if they knew the truth. But as she worked through her recovery, she discovered a community of others who had fought similar battles. These relationships, forged in honesty about failure and hope for redemption, became deeper and more sustaining than any she had known during her years of trying to appear perfect. As her recovery progressed, she found that others began seeking her out, not because she had all the answers, but because she had proven that change was possible. Her own suffering had equipped her to offer something unique to others facing similar challenges: hope grounded in experience rather than mere optimism. The pain that had once isolated her became the bridge that connected her to some of the most meaningful relationships of her life. This pattern repeats itself again and again among those who learn to suffer well. Their struggles become the foundation for their ability to help others. Their wounds, properly healed, become sources of wisdom and compassion. Their battles, fought and won, become testimonies that encourage others in their own fights. The fourth secret lies in understanding how suffering clarifies what truly matters. Most people go through life accumulating experiences, possessions, and achievements without ever stopping to ask whether these things actually contribute to their well-being. But suffering has a way of stripping away everything non-essential and revealing what really counts. When someone faces a serious illness, loses a loved one, or endures a major life upheaval, many of the things they once thought were important suddenly seem trivial. The promotion that consumed their thoughts, the social status they worked so hard to maintain, the material possessions they accumulated all fade in significance compared to relationships, health, and inner peace. This clarification isn't comfortable, but it's invaluable. Those who learn to suffer in silence often develop a laser focus on what genuinely matters in life. They stop wasting energy on petty concerns and invest themselves in relationships and activities that have lasting value. They become less impressed by external success and more interested in internal character. They shift from asking, "How can I get more?" to "How can I give more?" This reorientation doesn't happen despite their suffering, it happens because of it. A businessman who lost everything in an economic downturn exemplifies this transformation. For years, he had measured his worth by his net worth, judged success by his possessions, and defined happiness by his achievements. When financial catastrophe struck, he initially felt like a complete failure. But as he rebuilt his life from the ground up, he discovered values he had neglected for decades. The relationships he had taken for granted became precious. The simple pleasures he had overlooked in his pursuit of more became sources of deep satisfaction. The opportunity to help others, which he had viewed as a luxury he couldn't afford when focused on building wealth, became central to his sense of purpose. By the time he had achieved financial stability again, he was living a completely different kind of life, one that was smaller in external terms, but infinitely richer in the ways that actually matter. This clarity about priorities becomes a tremendous source of strength. When you know what really matters, you can endure the loss of things that don't. When your security is based on internal rather than external factors, you become much more resilient in the face of life's inevitable changes. When your identity is rooted in character rather than circumstances, you can navigate difficulties without losing your sense of self. The fifth and perhaps most profound secret that Tozer understood is how suffering can become a doorway to experiencing God in ways that comfort never allows. This isn't about a God who delights in human pain, but about recognizing that our deepest need for divine connection often emerges in our moments of greatest desperation. When our own resources prove inadequate, when our strength fails, and when our understanding reaches its limits, we become open to experiencing help and wisdom from beyond ourselves. Those who suffer in silence often develop a spiritual depth that amazes others. They speak of peace that doesn't make logical sense given their circumstances. They demonstrate hope that seems unrealistic based on their situation. They show love and kindness that appears impossible considering what they've endured. Where does this supernatural resilience come from? Often, it emerges from encounters with divine grace that only become possible when human self-sufficiency is stripped away. This doesn't mean that suffering automatically produces spiritual growth. Some people become bitter, angry, and closed off as a result of their hardships. The difference lies in how they approach their pain. Those who learn to suffer well maintain an openness to finding meaning beyond their understanding, purpose beyond their comprehension, and strength beyond their own resources. They discover that their weakness can become a place where divine strength is revealed. A father dealing with his child's terminal illness provides a powerful example. The diagnosis shattered his world and challenged everything he believed about fairness, protection, and hope. For months, he wrestled with anger, fear, and despair. But gradually, in the quiet moments beside his child's hospital bed, he began to experience a presence and peace that he couldn't explain. It wasn't that his circumstances changed, or that his pain disappeared. Rather, he found himself held by a love and strength that seemed to come from beyond his own resources. This experience transformed not just how he dealt with his immediate crisis, but how he approached life in general. He developed a confidence that whatever came, he wouldn't face it alone. He found himself able to comfort others in ways he never could before. His faith became less about having all the answers and more about trusting in a goodness that transcends human understanding. The suffering that threatened to destroy him became the foundation for a spiritual depth that blessed everyone around him. Understanding these secrets begins to reveal why those who suffer in silence often develop such remarkable strength. They're not stronger because they're superhuman. They're stronger because they've learned to draw from resources that those who avoid discomfort never discover. They've developed muscles of character that only get built under the weight of real challenges. They've gained perspective that only comes through experiencing both loss and restoration. But how do we apply these insights practically in our own lives? How do we move from understanding these principles to actually living them when we face our own seasons of difficulty? The first practical step is to change how we think about the inevitable challenges that come our way. Instead of viewing every difficulty as something to escape as quickly as possible, we can begin to approach our struggles with curiosity about what they might teach us. This doesn't mean seeking out suffering or pretending that pain isn't real. It means recognizing that since difficulty is unavoidable in human life, we might as well learn how to extract value from it. When facing a setback, disappointment, or loss, we can ask ourselves questions like, how is this experience revealing my character? What strengths am I being forced to develop? How might this difficulty be preparing me for future challenges or opportunities to help others? The second practical application involves developing what we might call a practice of purposeful reflection during difficult times. This means setting aside time regularly to consider not just what we're going through, but what we're learning from what we're going through. Many people stay so busy trying to manage their crises that they miss the growth that could emerge from them. A woman dealing with divorce found this approach transformative. Initially, she was so focused on the legal proceedings, the emotional trauma, and the practical challenges of rebuilding her life that she had no space for anything else. But when a friend suggested that she spend a few minutes each day writing about what she was learning from the experience, her entire perspective began to shift. She started noticing strengths she was developing that she never knew she possessed. She began recognizing patterns in her relationships that needed to change. She discovered interests and dreams that had been buried under years of trying to maintain a marriage that wasn't working. The divorce was still painful, but it was no longer purely destructive. It had become a difficult but valuable course in self-discovery and personal growth. The third practical step involves intentionally seeking connection with others who have faced similar challenges. This isn't about comparing pain or competing over who has suffered more. Rather, it's about recognizing that those who have walked similar paths often have wisdom and encouragement that can't be found anywhere else. Support groups, mentoring relationships, and spiritual communities often provide opportunities for this kind of connection. The key is finding people who have not just survived their difficulties, but have learned to transform them into sources of strength and service. These relationships provide both inspiration and practical guidance for how to navigate your own journey with grace and purpose. A young man struggling with mental health challenges found this approach life-changing. For years, he felt isolated and ashamed, convinced that his struggles marked him as weak or flawed. But when he finally connected with others who had battled similar issues, he discovered a community of remarkably strong and resilient people. They taught him strategies for managing his condition, but more importantly, they showed him that his struggles didn't have to define him negatively. In fact, they could become the foundation for a life of unusual depth and compassion. The fourth practical application involves developing what Tozer would have called spiritual practices that build inner strength over time. This includes regular prayer or meditation, study of wisdom literature, and cultivation of gratitude even in difficult circumstances. These practices don't eliminate suffering, but they build the spiritual muscles needed to handle it well when it comes. These disciplines are like physical exercise for the soul. Just as regular physical training prepares the body to handle physical challenges, regular spiritual training prepares the inner person to handle emotional and spiritual challenges. Those who have developed these practices before crisis hits often find that they have resources to draw upon that sustain them through the most difficult seasons. The fifth practical step is learning to shift focus from what we're losing to what we're gaining, even in the midst of difficulty. This isn't about denial or forced positivity. It's about training ourselves to notice the growth, strength, and wisdom that can emerge from challenging experiences. Every difficulty contains within it opportunities for development that wouldn't be available any other way. A couple dealing with financial hardship illustrates this beautifully. When unexpected medical bills and job loss created serious financial pressure, they initially focused entirely on what they were losing: their savings, their security, their plans for the future. But gradually, they began to notice what they were gaining: deeper appreciation for simple pleasures, stronger family bonds as they worked together through the crisis, and creative skills as they learned to live on much less. This shift in focus didn't eliminate their stress or solve their financial problems immediately, but it did prevent the situation from crushing their spirits. It allowed them to find meaning and growth even in circumstances they wouldn't have chosen. It transformed a purely negative experience into one that contained both loss and gain, both challenge and opportunity. As we consider these practical applications, it's important to remember that developing strength through suffering is a process, not a single event. Those who seem to handle difficulty with remarkable grace didn't develop that capacity overnight. They built it through many smaller experiences of choosing courage over comfort, growth over stagnation, and purpose over self-pity. This is both encouraging and challenging. It's encouraging because it means that anyone can develop this kind of strength. It's not reserved for a special few. It's challenging because it means that building resilience requires consistent choices over time, not just good intentions or momentary inspiration. The secret power of those who suffer in silence isn't really a secret at all. It's a pattern that anyone can learn to follow. It's a way of approaching life's inevitable difficulties that transforms them from purely destructive forces into opportunities for growth, connection, and spiritual depth. It's a choice to cooperate with suffering rather than just resist it, to learn from pain rather than just endure it, and to use struggles as stepping stones rather than stumbling blocks. This perspective doesn't make suffering pleasant or eliminate the real pain that comes with loss, disappointment, and hardship, but it does offer something precious: the possibility that our worst experiences can contribute to making us our best selves. It suggests that the very things that threaten to break us can become the tools that shape us into people of extraordinary strength and depth. As we conclude this exploration of why those who suffer most are often the strongest, it's worth remembering that strength isn't the absence of pain or the ability to handle everything perfectly. True strength is the capacity to find meaning in meaningless circumstances, to discover hope in hopeless situations, and to offer love even when you've been hurt deeply. The people around you who seem to carry their burdens with unusual grace haven't been given lighter loads. They've learned to carry their loads differently. They've discovered that suffering, approached with the right perspective and supported by the right practices, can become a teacher rather than just a tormentor. They've found that their scars can become sources of strength rather than just reminders of pain. If you're walking through a difficult season right now, if pain seems to be your constant companion, or if you're wondering whether your struggles have any purpose at all, remember this: the same difficulties that threaten to diminish you can become the very experiences that develop in you a strength that amazes everyone around you. The choice is yours. You can endure your suffering, or you can learn to transform it. You can let it make you bitter, or you can let it make you better. You can see it as purely destructive, or you can discover its hidden creative power. The secret of those who suffer in silence and emerge stronger isn't really about the suffering itself. It's about what they choose to do with their suffering. It's about the meaning they create from meaningless pain, the purpose they discover in purposeless hardship, and the strength they build from materials that others see only as obstacles. They understand what Tozer knew, that the deepest strength often emerges not from avoiding life's difficulties, but from learning to meet them with courage, wisdom, and grace. This powerful secret is available to anyone willing to embrace it. It requires no special talents, no perfect circumstances, and no guarantee of easy outcomes. It only requires the willingness to see suffering as a teacher rather than just an enemy, to view struggles as opportunities rather than just obstacles, and to approach pain as a potential doorway to growth rather than just an experience to survive. For those ready to embrace this perspective, suffering need never again be purely destructive. Instead, it can become the crucible where ordinary people are transformed into individuals of extraordinary strength, depth, and compassion. It can become the foundation for a life that not only survives difficulty, but actually grows stronger because of it. And in that transformation, we discover not just how to endure suffering, but how to allow it to create in us something beautiful, strong, and genuinely powerful.